enlightened, beautiful, and chaste. The word used in this connection is bina setave, which refers to one who has broken all the regulations for good behavior by not following the Vedic principles. In other words, according to Daksha, the entire transaction of the marriage of his daughter with Shiva was not in order. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'll just read those verses again, just in case anyone is going to watch online and they can see which verses we're doing. So this is Canto 4, Chapter 2, Text 11 to 13. Daksha is speaking. So text 11, he has already accepted himself as my subordinate by marrying my daughter in the presence of fire and brahmanas. He has married my daughter, who is equal to Gayatri, and has pretended to be just like an honest person. He has eyes like a monkey's, this is text 12, yet he has married my daughter, whose eyes are just like those of a deer cub. Nevertheless, he did not stand up to receive me, nor did he think it fit to welcome me with sweet words. Text 13. I had no desire to give my daughter to this person who has broken all rules of civility. Because of not observing the required rules and regulations, he is impure, but I was obliged to hand over my daughter to him, just as one teaches the messages of the Vedas to a Shudra. We're in the midst of Daksha's angry presentations towards Lord Shiva. And it's very interesting to see how this has come about, and also to reflect on how anger can sprout up, at any time. That these feelings of Daksha, as he's expressing now, I never wanted my daughter to marry him. He is not fit. He is this, he is that. So that he had these feelings there prior to this incident of Lord Shiva not standing up to receive him. And it's an interesting situation, because yes, Shiva has taken the position as the son-in-law of Daksha. So the son-in-law always respects the father-in-law that is there. However, who is Lord Shiva? He's the principal demigod, and he was, as Lord Brahma did not stand up to welcome Daksha, Shiva was not under the obligation to do that. But it wasn't that. Shiva was actually in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as Srila Prabhupada describes throughout these verses, what is the reason we offer respects to another? We're not offering respects to somebody else's body. We're offering respects to the Supersoul seated within everyone's heart. That's why we offer respect. So Lord Shiva was doing that because he was in meditation on the Supersoul. He was in meditation on the Supreme Lord. Daksha was upset because Shiva didn't raise to give respects to him, to his body, to his position. And then this anger has spilled out of Daksha, and now he is cursing Lord Shiva with harsh words. Harsh words. His eyes are just like that of a monkey. Can you imagine, in an assembly of all the devas, so many wonderful personalities, and yet here comes Daksha saying about Lord Shiva, his eyes are like a monkey's, he is impure, he is dishonest. So he's standing up and he's ranting now about Lord Shiva. And we can just, picture this situation. Shiva has spoiled the name and fame of everyone in the universe. He's so upset about this. Daksha is very angry. And this exhibition of his anger, we can learn a lot from that. Because and actually I wanted to make this point. He's so angry that he's actually even disrespecting his own father, Lord Brahma, in the way that he's speaking. In this verse 13, see what he says? He says, I had no desire to give my daughter to this person. I was obliged to hand over my daughter. Yes, his father, Lord Brahma, requested him to give his daughter. So he's not even, this anger is coming out in such a way saying, I was made to do this, I didn't want to do it, and in that way disrespecting his own father, Lord Brahma. So this is the extent of what can happen, you know, there's anger and envy can burn in the heart and then out spew these words. And when thinking about this, and we know, like in experience of our own life, words are so damaging. Words can really hurt. You know, no matter what, you might say something in a blast of anger, the receiving person, you don't forget those words, and those words can be extremely painful, very hard to reverse that. Very hard to make up for that when you speak harsh words against somebody. So this is a lesson for all devotees, for all people actually. And this is the first teaching in Nectar of Instruction by Srila Rupa Goswami, isn't it? We need to be able to control the urge to speak, control the demands of anger. This needs to be controlled. A sober person, he says, Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam, jiva vegam udara pasta vegam, etan veganyo vishaheta dira sarvam apimam pritivim sashishyat. Vegam, 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 over and over again in this verse. What is vegam? It's an urge. It's a pushing. It's, you know, it's propelling us, making us do something. We need to learn how to control our urges. And this is a very, this is like, it can be a preliminary step, but also it's a very elevated thing. Because for one who is able to do that, what does Rupa Goswami say? He's able to be guru. He's able to teach. He's able to guide. When one is able to do that, controlling these urges. Because this body is born, you know, we have this body, along with the body comes urges. We have the mind, along with the mind comes urges, pushings. So to learn and to practice how to control that, and to actually be able to control it in an honest way. Not that we're just pushing everything down and then one time we explode, but actually overcoming, you know, being able to, okay, the urge may come, I have no desire to act on it. That person is qualified to guide us and lead us in our spiritual life. That person can be guru. So, tolerating the urge to speak. This is it's difficult, you know, it's difficult. Especially, you know, we want our opinion to be heard, we want, you know, we want to get our opinion across, or under the influence of anger, things just spill out. So what is a way that we can practice controlling the urges of the tongue? It's through taking prasadam. And I was thinking about this last night. I was like, it may seem like that doesn't relate, but it really relates. Because if we are able to control the tongue by taking prasadam, so not that, okay, the tongue wants this, okay, I'm going to go down to the shop and grab it, you know, or I'm out, I'm hungry, therefore I just eat. Now, if we practice only taking prasadam, things that have been offered to Krishna, in our home, in the temple, wherever we are, you know, but if we practice that practice of restraint of the tongue, because it's restraining the tongue, actually. You know, we're not just letting the tongue go, okay, yeah, I feel like having this and I'll go and grab it, you know, but we restrain, you know, we prepare things for ourselves, we offer it to our deities, we take that prasadam. In that way, we're restraining the tongue. It's practicing. It's like, oh, there's an urge there, but I don't have to fulfill that urge straight away. My practice is that I take prasadam, and so therefore I offer and I do it like this. So we're practicing restraint of the tongue. So then the other urge that the tongue has to speak, if we're already practicing restraint of the tongue in terms of what we eat, then that restraint in speaking becomes a little easier. That the tongue is already becoming accustomed to being restrained. And the other aspect of it, as we read in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us that Actually, Srila Prabhupada says this in purport in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He says that for one who takes prasadam, they become immune. It's the vaccine, it's the big word of the moment. We become immune to the effects of material nature. We become immune, Srila Prabhupada says, to affection for material nature. Prasadam gives us immunity in that way. So then if we're not feeling that affection for material energy, if we're not being so much affected by the material energy, then we have a much better chance of being able to restrain our anger. Because what is anger? This is something in touch with the mode of passion. The passion is driving us, that's why we become angry. Passion and ignorance. So if we're practiced in taking prasadam, then we are less affected by those modes of material nature. So it may seem like, how does, taking prasadam relate to being able to speak, control the urge to speak, but it really does relate. And it's quite amazing. I was thinking about this, Krishna consciousness is a science. We hear that all the time. So there may be some little things like this, but actually there's a really good reason for why we take prasadam. Not just that it's delicious, but it's because it helps on so many levels. So if we can get that one right, that we practice the art of taking prasadam, then we have a much better chance to control the tongue in other ways. And we can see the result of Daksha coming under the influence of this anger, coming under the influence of envy, and actually having all of these repressed thoughts against Lord Shiva, never kind of working through that, and then out it spews, and we have this terrible situation where at a perceived offence, Lord Shiva wasn't actually being offensive, but because Daksha perceived it in that way, this whole situation comes about, where actually Daksha stands by and watches his daughter die. What does it lead? What can it lead to? It can lead to such a terrible situation. And the other point I wanted to bring out today is that, as we will see, as these verses progress and we go on, that what was Lord Shiva's reaction? Because we know that Shiva, he's also famous for being Ashutosh. He's famous for being very easily pleased and very easily angered. But does he become angry? No. Not in this first situation. After Sati dies, yes, he does. But not now. There's 2 big sacrifices that we're going through here, and this is the first one. So this is when Lord Shiva was in the sacrifice, Daksha has entered, Shiva did not stand up, Daksha starts blaspheming and cursing Lord Shiva. How does Shiva react? He sits, he's tolerant, he's quiet, he doesn't say anything. He gets up and he leaves. So this is the correct action, and we hear this and we see it in the Shastra, that a devotee can tolerate any sort of blasphemy against themselves. Yes, we have the very exemplary example of Srila Haridas Thakur. Yes, he took that offence, and we hear this in Shastastika, that we can tolerate all things. We offer all respects to others and we tolerate disrespect toward ourselves. However, a devotee does not tolerate offences towards another devotee or to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Lord Shiva's followers, they were not tolerant. They fought. They counter-cursed. We'll hear these curses against the Brahmanas, and then they fought. And they killed Daksha, cut off Daksha's head. That's in the second yagya. Daksha loses his head. But in this sacrifice, we'll hear counter-cursing. Counter-cursing, harsh words being thrown both ways, and then it splits up. And then we have the next sacrifice that Daksha was organising and did not invite Lord Shiva and Sati. But then when Sati went by herself, and then we have the whole scene where Sati leaves her body, and then the followers of Lord Shiva fight and kill Daksha. But the proper use of anger for a devotee, and Srila Prabhupada talks about that in this first verse of the Nectar of Instruction, is that the devotee becomes angry when another devotee or when the Supreme Lord is blasphemed or offended or hurt. We do not stand by. We don't tolerate offense towards another devotee. And we can see that in, even Krishna does this in Mahabharata. Towards the end of the exile of the Pandavas, you know, Yudhisthira, he's such a magnanimous personality, and he was being quite mild, and he was considering maybe we should just give it all up, maybe we should not fight like this, because it's coming down to the crux point that there's going to be a huge battle, and Yudhisthira is really considering maybe we shouldn't do this. Well, what did Krishna do? Krishna actually incited the anger of Yudhisthira. He said, no, this insult to Draupadi must be avenged. You cannot tolerate that. And Krishna again reminded all of the Pandavas of the situation. He went through, Draupadi was abused like this, and who stood up for her? Nobody stood up for her except for one honest Kshatriya, Vidura. He stood up, and Krishna describes in Mahabharata, Krishna's eyes are blazing, he's angry, and he says to Yudhisthira, you must fight this, you can't let that slide. Because of that offense towards the devotee, you cannot let that slide. And even Kunti Devi, as we know, Kunti Devi is the most humble devotee. She says to Yudhisthira, you must avenge your wife. You have to fight. You can't tolerate when another devotee is being offended or when the Supreme Lord is being offended. It's not the correct action for a devotee. We can tolerate whatever happens to ourselves, something personally towards ourselves, but in the community of devotees, in the society of devotees, we see another devotee is in danger, another devotee is being blasphemed. We do not tolerate that. That is Vaishnav. And Srila Prabhupada talks about that in regards to this controlling the urge of anger. That what is the proper use of anger? The proper use of anger, he says, the devotee becomes like fire if another devotee is being blasphemed or offended. So it's wonderful to see that, you know, this is a very rounded explanation of our philosophy of tolerance. That yes, a devotee can personally be tolerant for so much. We see that in Lord Shiva. He did not become upset. He did not retaliate when Daksha is cursing him, speaking in such harsh words. And you know, these kind of words, they may seem like nothing to us, like, oh, if someone says, oh, you look like a monkey, you have eyes like a monkey. But in this assembly of great personalities, this is the lowest behavior to speak like that. This terrible behavior. But Lord Shiva, he tolerated. But then when his wife was offended, changed, you know. So, yeah, there are two sides to that tolerance. Tolerance so much for whatever happens to oneself, but we do not tolerate the blasphemy or abuse of another devotee. Then we become like fire. Proper use of anger. Yes, so I wanted to talk about those two things today, really. Just control of the tongue, how we control these urges to speak, and this urge of anger, that we need to see it like an urge, yes, and that we can control that properly. One of the ways is by taking prasadam. Of course, another way is by chanting the holy name of Krishna, using the tongue properly, positively, and then we lose the taste for this lower harshness, you know. Our whole process of Krishna consciousness actually makes our heart so soft. Yes. The devotee's harsh words should be very far from a devotee's experience. We may have been like that before, but in the company of devotees and through the process of devotional service, then our hearts should become soft. So we can see that, how that happens. I think I'll leave it there. Would anyone like to make some comments or some reflections on these things? We're seeing quite an amazing pastime unfold. It takes quite a few chapters in Bhagavatam.
We can see in the world where anger has been just a prolonged thing between like two nations or two countries, and it's turned into some kind of sort of hatred, so that they actually ends up in the same way, isn't it? It's not necessarily that it goes away. It can, over generations, it's still there.
Yes.
Like, some countries have been fighting each other traditionally.
Yes. It's true. It's very destructive, isn't it? And we teach that to children. You know, how does it carry on for generations? Because we're actually passing it down, handing it down. Through our actions, the way that we speak and the way we behave, we're passing those things on to the future generations. So yes, you know, we see that. Countries continue fighting, or this race of person against that race. We see it throughout history. It's dangerous. This is why it's so important for us to get up off the bodily conception of life. Without that, all that happens is these things just perpetuate. It just goes along and along in the cycle. We hand it down, this anger, these harsh feelings, we hand it down to our children, and then they hand it down to their children, and it just continues on and on. And it's a very dangerous situation. No? Okay. Granthai Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.